welcome back to the Barbecue Pit Sports. We are here today to talk AFC West, one of the best divisions in the NFL at the moment. Definitely the most improved division in the NFL in this past year. So we're going to jump right into it. We're going to start with the Denver Broncos, who added Russell Wilson. They added Josh Johnson, a good backup for Russell Wilson. They added some protection in Tom Compton, Billy Turner. Randy Gregory, a really good edge rusher, signed with them. DJ Jones help in the middle. Alex Singleton made his way from Philly to Denver. And then Kwan Williams signed to be their slot corner in Denver because they lost Bryce Callahan. So they lost Callahan. They lost Kyle Fuller, replaced by Kwan Williams. They lost Teddy Bridgewater, Drew Lock. They're replaced by Russell Wilson, Josh Johnson, of course. Drew Lock getting the trade to Seattle for Russell Wilson. They also lost Noah Fant in the Russell Wilson deal. They lost Deshaun Hamilton. Bobby Massey is an offensive lineman. They lost Stephen Weatherly and Shelby Harris and Shamar Stephen, all leaving off the defensive line. A.J. Johnson is yet to be re-signed. Kenny Young also on the move. He went to the Raiders. They managed to bring back Kareem Jackson, Malik Reed, Josie Joel, Deshaun Williams, Cameron Fleming, Calvin Anderson, and Melvin Gordon. So Melvin Gordon coming to pair with Javonte Williams, who played exceptionally well last year. Kareem Jackson, a veteran safety that they damn sure should have kept. Malik Reed, Josie Joel, good for their linebacking core. Deshaun Williams, with everybody leaving off the defensive line, it's good to keep him. Their draft was okay. They had no first-round picks, but they had 8 picks from the rounds 2 to 6. The best picks were edge rusher Nick Bontino, who helps their edge rushing with Randy Gregory. They got a tight end in Greg Dulich to help kind of improve their depth at tight end after Noah Fant left. They got Demary Mathis in the 4th round. He is a cornerback. They need cornerback depth. I think that's probably one of their more weaker positional groups right now. And they also added a pair of defensive linemen in Matt Henningsen and Yona Nkutskre. So, I mean, that should add a little bit more to the depth chart. Overall, I don't really think that Denver did much. Cortland Sutton, I believe, might be out for an extended period of time. Jerry Jeudy dealing with some legal issues. No tight end and Noah Fant there, so we're going to have a young tight end trying to step up. Good running back duo, same as last year. And then still a good defense. You know, they lost a few pieces. They gained a few pieces. I think the Randy Gregory signing is probably the biggest defensive signing. DJ Jones is really good in the middle. And then, like I said, they keep Justin Simmons and Kareem Jackson, so I think their weakest positional group is probably corner at the moment. So we'll see how that does them. In a little bit, we're going to talk about the rest of the teams, and then we'll go on to what we think the rankings are going to be and the most improved and yada yada. So Kansas City, I think Kansas City declined a little bit. They signed Ronald Jones, Corey Coleman, Juju Smith-Schuster, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Carlos Dunlap, Derek Nadine, Jermaine Carter Jr., Deion Bush, Justin Reed, and Lonnie Johnson. They lost Darrell Williams, Tyreek Hill, Byron Pringle, Demarcus Robinson, offensive lineman Mike Remmers, Kyle Long, Austin Blythe, defensive lineman Alex Okafor, Jaron Reed, linebackers and Anthony Hitchens and Melvin Ingram, and then cornerback or defensive backs and Mike Hughes, Tre'Davious Ward, Tyrann Mathieu, and Daniel Sorensen. So they lose both of their starting safeties, but they sign Deion Bush, Justin Reed, and Lonnie Johnson. They lose Tyreek Hill, Byron Pringle, Demarcus Robinson. They try to replace those guys with Juju Smith-Schuster and Marquez Valdez-Scantling. They lose Darrell Williams. They bring in Ronald Jones. They also bring in Corey Coleman, who is kind of dealing with a lot of injuries over the course of his career, so that's kind of hit or miss. They also managed to re-sign Orlando Brown, Austin Reether, Frank Clark on the defensive line, Blake Bell, Jarrett McKinnon, and then Chad Henne to back up Patrick Mahomes. So what I think they did good and bad in the signings and losses, they got a little bit worse in the receiving corps. Tyreek Hill is one of the top receivers in the league. You didn't get a top receiver in the league back. So no matter what, you're going to take a loss there. But Demarcus Robinson, I would take Marquez Valdes-Scantling over Demarcus Robinson. I would also take a healthy Corey Coleman over Byron Pringle. So depending on how Corey Coleman does, I don't think the wide receiver room is a terrible loss. I think Ronald Jones is an improvement over Darrell Williams. Other than that, they've kind of had a little bit of lateral movement. They brought back some O-line. They lost some O-line. They replaced their defensive backs that they lost. They lose Anthony Hitchens. They bring in Jermaine Carter Jr. So it's a little bit of lateral movement. I think they kind of declined a little bit in the receiver core and the safety core, defensive back core, I guess. And then they improved a little bit kind of in the meaty part, the linebacker, D-line, shit like that. They kind of went lateral. So they drafted, in the first round, they drafted cornerback Trent McDuffie and edge rusher George Karlaftis. I think George is going to be an immediate starter. A lot of people compared him to, they said, a guy like Giannis Antetokounmpo, who came from that part of the world and came in and it took a few years, but then now look, he's like one of the best NBA players, in the entire league. They think that George Karlaftis could be something similar to that, as he came from that part of the world. He's a really big, filled out, NFL-ready body-wise. So there's a lot of upsides for Karlaftis. And Trent McDuffie, they lost a few cornerbacks in free agency, so bringing in a young rookie cornerback to partner with the guys that are already there is a really good move. Sky, in the second round, they brought in Sky Moore, wide receiver, and then a safety and Brian Cook. And then they had 6 picks from the 3rd to 7th round that included linebacker Leo Chanel, running back Isaiah Pashito, and safety Nazith Johnson. So Nazith Johnson probably going to give them some depth at the safety position. Isaiah Pashito probably going to be used more in the return game. And then Leo Chanel just adds a little bit of linebacker depth. They lost Anthony Hitchens. So the veteran aspect of the linebacker core they have is kind of gone. So they're going to have a lot of rookie guys, a lot of young guys in the linebacker core. So adding more depth is good for that. That gives them room for injuries, room for anything that could possibly happen to that linebacker core. So a good draft, not bad. I still think the Kansas City Chiefs declined a little bit, but that's neither here nor there. Las Vegas Raiders. Now, Las Vegas Raiders added a significant amount of people. They lost a significant amount of people. I think the re-signings, the people they brought back, is kind of the shortest list we have here, so we're going to go over that first. They brought back Jonathan Haskins, Max Crosby, Hunter Renfrow, and Derek Carr. They brought in Chandler Jones to match with Max Crosby, so that's like one of the deadliest pass rushing duos in the entire league. They brought in Devontae Adams in a trade with Green Bay to pair him with his longtime best friend in Derek Carr. They brought in 3 different quarterbacks, I guess, to kind of fight over who's going to be the backup: Jared Stidham, Nick Mullins, and Garrett Gilbert. They brought in a few running backs, Amir Abdullah and Brandon Bolden. They solidified their fullback position after losing Alex Ingold with Jacob Johnson. They brought in other wide receivers in Keelan Cole, Demarcus Robinson, Jacob Hollister to the tight end position. They brought in Brandon Parker to their offensive line. On the defensive line, they brought in Vernon Butler and Bilal Nichols. They also got linebackers Jerron Brown, Kyler Fackrell, and Kenny Young. And then their defensive backs they brought in were Anthony Everett, Rock Ya-Sun, and Damon Harmon. So a couple of veterans there. But they did get overall better. I mean, if you look at what they lost here, Marcus Mariota, he went to Atlanta. Peyton Barber, Jalen Richard out of the backfield. Alex Ingold, like we said, he went to Miami. Brian Edwards, Deshaun Jackson, Zay Jones, and then Derek Carrier. Richie Incognito retired. Nick Martin left. Carl Nassib left. Yannick Ngakoue got traded to the Colts for Rocky Asen. Quentin Jefferson, Gerald McCoy, and Solomon Thomas all left. Nick Kawatowski, and Corey Littleton, and Nick Morrow, KJ Wright, all leaving off their linebacker depth chart. Brandon Fashion, Casey Hayward, Keyshawn Nixon, and Desmond Trufant, all defensive backs that left in the offseason. I just think they got better, man. I think their wide receivers they brought in, Devontae Adams, Keelan Cole, Demarcus Robinson, outweigh the ones they lost, Brian Edwards, Deshaun Jackson, and Zay Jones. Zay Jones probably being the biggest one that they lost. Devontae Parker way overshadows Zay Jones. They brought in Amir Abdullah and Brandon Bolden. All they lost was Peyton Barber, Jalen Richards. Upgrade there. They bring in Anthony Everett, Rocky Sin, and Damon Harmon. They lose Brandon Fashion, Casey Hayward, Keyshawn Nixon, and Desmond Trufant, which, Casey Hayward, I'd say probably the best out of that group. But overall, when we're talking about bringing in 4, losing 4, it was a win for them there as well. And I think the only other positional group that was like a big addition and loss was their linebacker core, Jaron Brown, Kyler Fackrell, and Kenny Young, where they lost Nick Katakowski, Corey Littleton, Nick Morrow, and KJ Wright, which KJ Wright, back half of his career, Nick Morrow, a bottom part of the depth chart type of guy, Corey Littleton, bottom part of the depth chart type of guy, and then Nick Katakowski, who probably the biggest name of the linebackers that they lost. But when you're bringing in guys like Jaron Brown, Kyler Fackrell, and Kenny Young, you really don't mind stuff like that. And then on top of that, you get in the draft, they didn't have any picks in the first or second round. The first pick was in the third round. They drafted Dylan Parham, which is going to be a great addition to their offensive line. They also got their hands on Zamir White, a running back out of South Carolina. And then 2 defensive linemen, and Neil Farrell Jr. and Matthew Butler, which defensive linemen I think is kind of where they took their biggest hit, and they didn't add in the offseason. They lost Quentin Jefferson, Gerald McCoy, Solomon Thomas. So bringing in those 2 young defensive linemen is definitely going to be good for their depth chart there. And then bringing in Zamir White, I think this guy in a rotation of Josh Jones, Kenyon Drake, Brandon Bolden, Amir Abdullah, and then him, Zamir White, there's going to be if they're only looking to keep 4 running backs. Some teams keep 5, so no big deal. But if they're looking to keep only 4, that's going to be a tough – it's going to be hard to cut one of those guys. I'm going to lean towards, if I have to give a prediction, I would lean towards it's probably going to be Amir Abdullah. Although Amir Abdullah could fit into the kick return game, which could solidify his spot on the roster as well. That might be why they keep 5 running backs. But significant improvements for the Raiders this offseason. And that brings us to the Los Angeles Chargers. Not much to say about the Chargers this year. They went crazy in the offseason. They brought in kick returner DeAndre Carter, tight end Gerald Everett. Great addition to their tight end room with Darren Waller. They brought in Morgan Fox and Austin Jackson on the D-line. Khalil Mack came to the team. He's going to be, just like the Raiders, Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa is probably, 1 and 2 is the Chargers-Raiders. When it comes to pass rushing duos, it's Chargers-Raiders, Raiders-Chargers, one way or the other. But with the addition of Khalil Mack, there's no question there. They also brought in Kyle Van Noy, Bryce Callahan, and J.C. Jackson. So to a cornerback room that already had Asante Samuel and a few other key guys in their defensive back room, they also brought in Bryce Callahan, which is one of the best nickel corners in the league, and then J.C. Jackson is one of the best lockdown corners in the league. They re-signed Sebastian Joseph Day, Christian Covington, Mike Williams, and Chase Daniel. So they brought back their backup quarterback. They brought back Mike Williams, which was a need, and then they brought back 2 defensive linemen and Joseph Day and Covington. They only lost, I would say, there's no huge names here that they lost. They lost their return man and Andre Roberts. They got him replaced by DeAndre Carter. They lost Justin Jackson. All right, that's a they didn't really do anything to replace that in the offseason per se. They lost Jared Cook, replaced him with Gerald Everett. They lost Uday Abushi and Michael Schofield, Brian Beluga, all on the offensive line. Linval Joseph and Justin Jones off of the defensive line, but they, like I said, they replaced them with Morgan Fox and Austin Jackson. And then they also lost linebackers Kyler Frackle and Ichuka Nuwoso, Kaiser White, Chris Harris, and Ryan Smith, all guys that they lost in the offseason. But, I mean, if you look at their additions and their draft, they drafted Zion Johnson first round, good addition to their offensive line. J.T. Woods, a safety in the third round, which gives them depth to Nasir Adderley, Derwin James, guys like that. They got Isaiah Spiller, a running back, in the fourth round. He's going to be probably their number 2 or number 3 running back behind Austin Eckler. Onito Abunya on the defensive line. That was a good addition. They brought in the sixth round, Jamiri Slayer, an offensive tackle, and Jasir Taylor, a cornerback. And then in the seventh and final round, they brought in a fullback in Xander Hoftheft and a cornerback in Dan Leonard. So depth all around. A good add in Isaiah Spiller. I think, if Austin Eckler goes down, he could fight for the starting job. But overall, significant improvements in the Los Angeles Chargers. The records was hard to figure out. So what I did, because all these teams are so good, and I didn't really feel like going into it and figuring, maybe this person will be injured, and at this point in the season, what's going to happen? I didn't do any of that. So what I said is each team split the division with all of their division foes. So everybody goes 1-1 inside the division. And if that happens, I predicted the Raiders coming in first at 12-5, the Chargers coming in second, or the Chargers tied for second, but I gave them the nod because of the points. They'll probably run up more points than the Broncos at 11-6. Broncos at 11-6 as well in third place, and then the Chiefs at 10-7. Every team in the division having a winning record. I'd say the team that had the best draft came in last in the division. That was Kansas City Chiefs. And then the best offseason, I'd say, is a split fucking tie-up between the Raiders and Chargers. Notably enough, when we're talking about strength of schedule, I've been looking at it wrong this whole time. So the number one hardest schedule in the entire league this year is the Kansas City Chiefs. That's kind of why I put them last as well, is because they were the only team in the division that took a step back, in my opinion, and they got the hardest schedule in the entire league. Definitely took them back. The Raiders, the third hardest schedule in the league, but still I had them winning. Chargers, 13th hardest schedule in the league, and then the Broncos, 16th hardest schedule in the league. So in the division, from strength of schedule, it goes Chiefs, Raiders, Chargers, Broncos. It kind of plays a factor into it when you're talking about strength of schedule, especially outside of the division. But I think the reason these guys are all in the top half of the strength of schedule is because they all have to play each other twice. So, I mean, those are 2 games right off the bat, or 6 games right off the bat that are hard games out of 17. So, it's tough. It is tough, but I think the Raiders are going to come out on top. I could see all 4 of these guys going to the playoffs, but I don't think it will be. I think it would be just 2. I think that there's going to be a lot of talent coming out of that AFC with, Buffalo, Miami. What the fuck was that? We're going to wrap it up. Till next time, stay barbecue. You guys know what the fuck it is. You got to go check this out.